Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. It is September the 5th, and we are rolling in all the places that we roll. I just got a little thank you from, who said that? Free 50 over on Locals. If you guys want to join us on Locals, you can do that. It doesn't cost you anything to be a member. If you want to be part of the community and get involved, KyleSeraphin.com is how you will get there. And if you do want to sign up and be a subscriber, you can do that as well. It costs you $5 a month, or you can do it for a year for $50 and get 2 months for free. There's going to be some exclusive stuff coming. Most specifically, the thing I'm excited about, which I've been working on in the background here, we want to do a call-in show. We want to hear what you guys have to say. We is just me. I don't know why I say we, but I like to think of myself as a unit with my wife, so that's what it is. There's going to be a call-in show. We're going to put something together where only subscribers are going to get the phone number. The phone number will change every month, and you guys can leave voicemails for us during the week. You can also call and talk to us live. And we're going to do that with a guest, whether it be a suspendable or somebody who wants to join us for kind of an interview from you guys as well, and put your questions out there. I'll try to get some interesting folks on. Most specifically, we're going to probably kick it off with Garrett O'Boyle, my buddy. And I know people have questions and thoughts for him, and sometimes just want to wish him well. And we'll just kind of hang out for a little bit. Now, everybody will be able to watch the show, but only our local subscribers will be able to ask the question. So if you want to be part of the show, you want to be part of the team, you want to support independent media, man, that's going to be a big topic today. Jump on at Locals, KyleSeraphin.com. Let's do that. All right. Also, I want to do a big thank you to my buddies over at Catholic Vote, who I do not think are Russian agents, but we've seen some people get conned this week. Pretty interesting story of Tenet Media is going to be dominating what we're talking about today. Foreign interference in the election, what it means, what it shouldn't mean, why we should be always skeptical of people who want to offer us something for nothing. But also, shouldn't we be skeptical of the DOJ? Like, do we really trust these idiots? Not me. I do trust the folks over at Catholic Vote. If they are a Russian op, they are a really good one, and they actually care about Jesus, so that's pretty cool too. In which case, we'll take it. I've been on retreats with these folks, and they're good. They're good to the bone. They really are great people, especially the founder, Brian Birch, who's an outstanding human being and has 9 kids, putting his money where his mouth is for faith, for family, for freedom. He gets us. He gets me. So I appreciate them supporting us. If you guys want to go and back them up, you can go to CatholicVote.org. You should get the loop. Today's loop's got some pretty good stuff that I am not covering, and it will give you a little bit more information. Stories of National Guardsmen who are denouncing Tim Walz. That's not shocking. They're covering the school shooting, which we will as well. A priest braving the flames to go and rescue the Holy Eucharist and pulling it out of a church of the Immaculate Conception in France that was on fire. Kind of a testament to people's faith. I think that's really cool. More about the administration of the false job reports. And Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank talking about how Democrats, cities, and states destroy businesses. I think we kind of know that intuitively, but it's nice to hear people who've made a lot of money and work in business do it. So check out the loop. Again, it's CatholicVote.org if you want to go sign up. And you should. You'll be missing out if you don't. Should we dive into this thing in a big way? Yeah, I think we shall. Also, for those of you who are in the chat, thanks so much for joining us. I see that Kimmy Rodriguez over there on YouTube. Good morning. Good morning to you. And if you want to join us on Rumble, you guys should do so as well, because you can see our chat just moves a lot faster and there's all kinds of fun people in there. All right, let's get into it. Here we go. The DOJ Task Force. This is where I want to start off. We're going to be talking about election interference, and not the interference that all of us are concerned about. I think the election interference I'm concerned about are fake voters, are fraudulent votes, are people who are manipulating at the precinct level and the state level the results of swing states for the most part. That's what I'm concerned about. The integrity of the election. But that is not what the DOJ is interested in. And you guys kind of know this, right? ABC News is reporting that the DOJ Task Force, which was formed in 2021 to fight election threats, that's very vague. Hold on, I got to just do an aside. Whenever you hear the term threats in relation to federal law enforcement, that should get your antennas and your hackles up. You should immediately get the willies because of this. Is that a thing people say, the willies? You should be concerned when the word threats come out because the word threats doesn't have to equal crimes. This is intelligence speak, and I saw it firsthand while working for the Bureau. We used to investigate foreign threats that did not have a violation of federal law. Threats are amorphous. Threats can include all of you. Threats include me. And threats are things that can be categorized as an interest of the government without actually a violation of law. So foreign election threats, or more specifically in this case, simply election threats, it makes me know that we're about to deal with something that's disingenuous. And that's why they've only brought 20 cases. Of the 2,000 reported threats by election workers, only 20 people have been charged. Because threats are not crimes. They don't have to be crimes. Let me give you some examples. A person who owns firearms and flies a flag outside of their house, like maybe, I don't know, someone in the Seraphin family has done in their time, that says, come and take it. It has a cannon and a star. It's the 1835 Gonzales battle flag, and it represents the opinion that many of us have about firearms and our government's relationship with them. Our government, which is acting more like the Mexican army run by Santa Anna in the Texas Revolution. If you fly that flag, you might be considered a threat, a potential threat at the very least, which is something that I've revealed to you guys. If you fly a Betsy Ross flag, if you think that the First Amendment is absolute and you should be able to say anything that you would like, then you may be, in fact, a threat. But what about the real, actual threats that are out there, the things that are violations of federal law? They're less interested in that kind of stuff. On Wednesday, this is reading from the story here, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, issued a stern warning to those who would seek to harm election officials. This is a real thing. It's kind of like the same Merrick Garland who said that there were, quote unquote, threats that were a federal issue to school board members. This is the reason why I'm a public figure and not an FBI agent. It's one of the major reasons. It's very simply because you can go to a school board and you can have harsh words. You could even issue threats, actual threats, like I'm going to pull you out of that chair and drag you into the parking lot and teach you a lesson. You can say those things and they are none of the federal government's business. This is actually going to play a little bit further into the school shooting situation because, as you guys can always expect, I will give it to you fair. And I will also shoot it fair for the people that are still working in the Bureau. I don't like to have to be in the position of defending. But when we have lazy media and the entire political right yelling, it was on our radar. This is not a real thing. First of all, the FBI does not have a radar. As someone who has actually worked on a radar before, who has actually tracked planes as an air traffic controller, I'm just going to tell you, there's no actual radar, right? It's a metaphor. And the metaphor is that they were aware of this person, but they're aware of a lot of you and me and all kinds of quote unquote threats. And so we have to take that all with a grain of salt. In any case, Merrick Garland said, we are reiterating today that there are cases that are a warning to you if you threaten to harm or kill an election worker or an official or a volunteer. The Justice Department will find you and we will hold you accountable. And they've done so exactly 20 times because most of these threats are not federal. They don't rise to the level of a federal crime. They have actually no business. This is a complete waste of time. What they have told us is they are going to focus their attention on suppression and threats to election officials, but they are not interested in the actual threat to our elections, which is to say that we would have a free, fair, and integrity-filled election. One where we can actually say that one person equals one vote and that person equals a registered and appropriate voter. They're not interested in that. It's also interesting to note that the FBI said that they're completely swamped with threats. Paul Abbate, who I have zero love for and who may or may not have knocked up one of his junior staffers, because that's a thing that he does, sleep with employees, per multiple sources inside the FBI in the headquarters building, both retired and current. The issue is they get so many threats Think January 6th. Think pick up the phone and I'm going to call and report my neighbor. They get so many threats that they have now had to integrate AI. This is something he just testified to. They're getting 4,000 calls or emails or tips per day of people. Just do the basic math on that. I didn't actually work it out. So let's figure that out on a basis here. 4,000 times 365, right? We're talking about 1.5 million. It's 1.46 million threats. And that doesn't include any high days. And they probably have some low days as well. But let's assume 1.5 million threats per year are reported to what's called NTOC, the National Tactical Operations Center, I think is what it's called, or National Threat Operations Center. It's in West Virginia. We actually have a guy who used to work there, got kicked out of his job because of the COVID stuff. This is a thing that the government does, not very efficiently. And they have these sort of like hourly employees that come in. They're not FBI agents. They're not analytical personnel. I don't actually know what their training looks like. And they shove out, okay, these are legit. Now, we find out that there are people like Jenna Howell, which is also interesting. Jenna Howell was a person that we called out on the show. We called out on social media, and she was suspended for her anti-Trump rhetoric. There are a lot of left-leaning people there. I was actually shocked to find how many people lean left in West Virginia, at least in the cities. I guess that's where they're hiring from. This is why the FBI hires people that have college degrees, because you spent enough time in indoctrination. Maybe you're young enough that you can be assumed to be part of the team, the pro-government team. In any case, these threats are so numerous that they can't field them all. So they have to prioritize them, and they're going to prioritize them based on the things that are important to the regime and to the administration. And in this case, the Biden administration is most interested in threats to election workers, not in having a fair, free, or safe election. And that also means that there's going to be an opportunity cost when they're doing this kind of stuff. I want to talk about the school shooting because it happened. This is the coverage that we saw on CNN. They've got a latest on the school shooting. They've got live updates. They've got who we're covering. There are multiple stories. This is the thing going on. Apparently, a 14-year-old kid walked in with an AR-15, killed 4 people, injured 9 or 30. The reports are kind of like iffy. A lot of people got hurt. And it's absolutely horrible. And it's totally local news. The saddest thing that the Obama administration did, this is according to Jesse Kelly, and I just read this before we went live. I think he's correct. The saddest thing the Obama administration did was normalize the politicization of school shootings. These are local tragedies. They have nothing to do with you or me. The fact is that I have children that are, young. That doesn't mean that I have anything to do with what's going on in a small high school in Georgia. And neither do you, most of you. If you don't live and have some strong connection in that area, like a family member who was at the school, what does this have to do with you? This is a local, sad tragedy. The problem is the political right is going to use it to go and take a shot on the FBI. The political left is going to use it to take a shot at guns. Everybody is using it to do something other than say, this is a horrific moment. These kids are going to be traumatized. Some child's life is destroyed that decided for some god-awful reason, whether it's demons running wild in their brain, whether it's bad culture, whether it's pharmaceuticals, which we're not going to get a lot of details on yet. Some kid walked out there and decided to end the life of people around him at the age of 14, and he's done. He's cashed in. So that family is devastated as well. There's a lot of sadness that goes on. The problem is, we're all focusing on not the issue here, which is like what causes kids to do this? What sort of hopeless society are we raising them in, normalizing that kind of violence? And of course, it is not a national story if you were to get right down to it. And the reason I know that is because we covered this the other day. Let me see if I can pull this up. Do you remember this story? Also had 4 people killed. Homeless people. Are homeless people worth less than kids? They probably have less potential, but they're still human beings. If you're a Christian person, then you would believe that all lives have some value. Some people choose to give more value to their life than others. 4 people were killed on a transit train. They were literally just homeless people sleeping on a train, which says a lot about how we take care of the homeless as we bring in millions and millions and millions of people across the southern border. They didn't do a live update on what was going on here. They didn't talk about the subject and the fact that it was some like little white kid whose name was Colt, right? They didn't even name the subject. They didn't describe the subject who did the shooting, taken into custody. Didn't describe the victims. None of that. We're not going to get profiles in who they were and how they ended up on the streets and how they ended up sleeping in a car. None of that. So don't tell me that these shootings are all important if they're not going to cover them that way. And I know they're not going to. The problem for the FBI story is this kid was reported in 2013 because of online threats. In actuality, it was just online threats were reported to the FBI. One of those 4,000 a day that we hear Paul Abbate talk about. And when that happens, the FBI does the thing that it does. It runs down and it looks for one thing and one thing only. Is there a federal nexus to what we're doing? And does this rise to the level of a true threat? Does the person have the ability to do so? The means? Is it legitimately accurate? Is this an actual action that is being threatened? Or is this someone who's just typing things? It's important to understand that 1 year ago, this kid at the age of 13 apparently posted pictures of a gun and said some things that were dangerous. What are we going to do with a 13-year-old kid? For interstate threats, we're going to prosecute them as an adult? Is that really what we want? And how many of these things get reported? How many of your kids are saying dumb things on the internet? It's a really good reminder to homeschool your kids and keep their internet activity under close observation. The chat is going nuts right now because apparently I said 2013. No, he was 13 years old. It was last year. It was 2023. It's a 1-year-old report that went to the FBI. So if that is the case, the Bureau doesn't really have any way to deal with it. Garrett, Steve, and I have all fielded interstate threat cases. They're called threat to life cases. They come in under the eGuardian system, and we get them, and then you go out there and you evaluate. Is this person for real? Is there anything we can do about it? Do they intend to actually carry this threat out? And generally speaking, there's either no federal nexus, there's no legitimate resources that can be applied. In the case of this kid, it was sent off to the local sheriff's department, which is exactly the right thing to do most of the time. And apparently the sheriff's office evaluated it, interviewed the father and the son. What else would you have them do? You can't lock up 13-year-old kids for posting stupid things on the internet. So then the question becomes this. Was this kid on antidepressants? Was this kid on antipsychotics? Was this kid on any sort of pharmaceutical interventions? Maybe even just Adderalls? Were there medications involved in this kid's behavior? And after that interview, did they seek it? Because the one thing that my wife brought up, who worked as a mental health professional, you bring this kind of story to a dad who didn't know that his kid was troubled and posting stuff online. And maybe he's looking for that easy button. Boop, we push it. Let's get this kid medicated. Let's solve this problem. I don't have time for him or whatever's going on. Is it possible that that kid was actually evaluated and then actually the problem got worse? Very possible. We're not going to find all that stuff out yet. Right now, everybody's too busy politicizing it. They're not going to be talking about the kid and the underlying causes. We're going to be talking about whether or not the FBI knew, which is garbage. I'm just telling you, they know about a lot of stuff. They can't act on all of them. And if you are a person who watches the show, you should know why we don't want them to. I don't want the biggest hammer to hit down on every single individual little threat that has been tossed out there in the world. And I also don't want to actually try to blame the tool. So the left will blame the guns and the right will say the FBI screwed up and everybody, it turns out, is wrong. And that's where you end up if you're a suspendable, standing in the middle saying, come on, there is context to all of this crap. Let's be smarter about it. It doesn't stop them from talking about, here's political left stuff, talking about how we can visualize mass shootings in 2024. And what we see here is that there was a departure. And it looks like that departure happened in, let's call it, it looks like 2019 was a big change. From 2019 to 2020, what we saw was a rise in how they categorize things that are referred to as mass shootings. And we're going to talk about that because that shooting in Chicago in the train would 100% fall into that category. And right now, we're somewhere in between what happened in 2020 and the 2020, 21, 22, and 23 years. Those are all the top lines of that graph. Those are all worse. And right now, we are trending below those, a return closer to the normalcy, if that, whatever you want to call it. But that happened between 2013 and 2019, which is less mass shootings, all of which are sad. Let me define mass shootings as CNN does, because these people all like to use different terms. Sometimes it's about the number of people killed. Sometimes it's about the number of injured. There's an awful lot of mass shootings that happen in Chicago. I would like to see the graph of mass shootings simply for Chicago and then just broadly for Democrat cities, because my suspicion is almost all of these things actually happen there. The reason that we hear of the very, very small number of these things is because only a few of them make political hay for the political left who's trying to work against guns. And that actually fits into the Harris agenda of looking to ban assault weapons, as we covered the other day. 2024, as of yesterday afternoon, when this piece was put out, 391 what they call mass shootings, defined as a shooting that injured or killed 4 or more people, not including the shooter. That's an awful lot of things that happen in the city of Chicago. They happen in Philadelphia. They happen in Washington, D.C. They happen in a lot of these left-leaning, left-run cities. A lot of it is inner-city crime, and it's black people killing black people and Hispanic gangs killing other either gang members or people in their community. It's really sad. They are no less valuable as human beings if you look at them in a broad sense of, does human life matter? But it's also predictable because the policies are leading to leniency on criminals and people that disregard the value of human life. We are living in a society where a lot of people do not share what I would call American values, Western values, that the individual matters. We are getting a lot closer to some of the things that are non-Western. And you can see this every single time I look at the Hajj and the pilgrimage, where you hear about hundreds of people are trampled to death or die in the heat or all the other things. The number of people that die in foreign nations from like minor things like, oh, there was a mudslide. And you're like, oh, there's a mudslide in California. And like 5 cars went into the ocean. And then you hear about a mudslide in like Bangladesh or India. And you're like, oh, 234 people died. They don't look at human life the same in every part of the world. And if you have never traveled the world and seen that people look at human life differently, not everybody thinks that all people are valuable the way that you might. And we're letting a lot of that into this country, and it is changing the way that we look at this stuff. These mass shootings are tracked by a group that's called GVA. And I was really interested in about the GVA, which is the Gun Violence Archive. So I did a little bit of just a very light run down the rabbit hole on them. Again, this is CNN reporting, and that's who they use. They use data from the Gun Violence Archive, which is a nonprofit formed in 2013 to track gun-related violence. And I don't know what gun-related violence is. That's violence that was done with a firearm, I guess. Does it include suicides? It's such a vague term because it's like, that'd be like telling me about hammer-related construction. It's like, okay, so only the things that are built that don't have any hammers on the job site would be excluded. It's kind of like an irrelevant thing. So here you have the Wikipedia piece on it. It's an American nonprofit, an accompanying website, and their social media delivery platform, which tells us they're in the media business. They like to move things out there into the space. And it was formed by this person named Michael Klein and Mark Bryant. And then it says Klein is the founder of the Sunlight Foundation, and Bryant was a former government worker. So then you look up the Sunlight Foundation, and they're another nonprofit. So you have a nonprofit group that's founded and funded by another nonprofit group, and their job is to advocate for transparency in government, and that gets kind of weird. And so you just keep going down these rabbit holes. Whenever I find like there's like shell company after shell company or foundation that funds another foundation, you start getting really weird. Apparently, this guy, Klein, is a left-leaning philanthropist. I don't know why I couldn't say that. He's a left-leaning philanthropist and a government or an open government advocate. And he also founded the CoStar Group, or he was a big part of that. It sounds like he owned this like large commercial property thing. They own homes.com. They operate apartments.com and some other websites you probably are familiar with. It was founded by somebody else, but he was like one of the major principals there. So that's kind of interesting. And then you go to the Second Amendment Foundation, find out that they just said that this guy is just really left-leaning and that's what he's into. And that they have been basically trying to scare America about guns because they sort of present things in a disingenuous way. I don't know. I just don't like not knowing where information comes from, and the idea that CNN would simply cite the Gun Violence Archives, and we're like, oh, that sounds very official. That's a very official sounding name. We should just take them at their word. I don't want to take anybody at their word. I do want to take Kamala Harris at her word in one way, though, because all of this stuff kind of popped up because somebody decided to take a firearm to school. Do you know what we don't have a rash of in this country? We don't have a ton of airport shootings. Have you noticed that? There's not a lot of people that go in and shoot up an airport. There's an expectation of security there, is there not? There's magnetometers. There is a security presence, even though they may not be very good at it. There's at least an illusion of it. We don't have a mass of courthouse shootings either. Courthouses seem to always have either a sheriff's deputy or a local police department that are manning. They've got some sort of a security screening process, whether it's federal or whether it's state. There's things going on there. We don't have all kinds of people getting shot in courtrooms. It does happen on occasion. It's kind of a big deal when it does. And what do those things have in common? It's people with some sort of authority carrying firearms in uniform to deter stupidity. What if we did that for schools? What if we didn't do that for schools? What if we removed them because of the trauma of it and we just left this stuff open so we could continue to talk about guns being the problem and not actually modernize the world and look at security as being the issue? Kamala Harris doesn't have kids. I'll say it again. The childless cat lady thing, it matters because when you have kids, you think about things differently. My answer is don't let your kids go to school. I don't let them into places where I'm not running. I run the security for the school in the Seraphin household, which means you have a very aggressive, very close by, very well armed and trained person, both in emergency medicine and in intervening in a threat. So if someone decides to come through the door of the Seraphin schoolhouse, it's a bad decision. But that's not going to happen. I don't see that really happening. I see them going through other schools because that's where you have a bunch of people who are young, who are easy, soft targets, and we're making them more. Here's Kamala Harris talking about why she thinks that should continue. She doesn't like the militarization of schools.
Being incarcerated for a couple of days is traumatic, much less the weeks, months, and years that we're seeing that happen. And so part of my plan is also a reduction of that. And then also, again, what we need to do about demilitarizing our schools and taking police officers out of schools. We need to deal with the reality and speak the truth about the inequities around school discipline. We're in particular.
We need to talk about the realities of the inequities. How about people that get involved in doing things that are antisocial behaviors in schools should probably see the consequences of it and allow those who actually want to learn and be there continue to learn and be there. It's a really interesting take. What you're not seeing a huge amount of coverage is that an SRO was supposedly the person who intervened and stopped this kid. He was actually taken into custody without being killed, which is also incredible. All this stuff is sad. It should bring a lot of sadness. It should make us know that we're talking about people that don't care about doing the right thing. What they care about is using all the political currency they can find. And if that means kids dying in schools, there's a reason why David Hogg has a career. He doesn't seem to have a skill set. He got into Harvard, but he doesn't seem that bright. It's certainly not for his good looks or his charming personality. And he was one of the first people on Twitter talking about how the problem is guns. The problem cannot be inanimate objects that have been in American society since the beginning. Cannot be. I've had a former school resource officer work out who's been on the program. Steve Sharp reached out. We may have him on to kind of talk about it. Maybe we might do just a special chat about safety in schools and some of the real effective things. He spent 11 and a half years doing that job. So maybe we'll have something that is a specific. If you guys are interested in it, let me know. Let me know in the comments if you want to have a discussion about whether or not it would make sense and what kind of things he thinks would be effective. He was one of the guys who responded to the shooting at the Pensacola Naval Base. And he also was an SRO and helped coordinate the school, or maybe he wasn't an SRO, but he helped coordinate the safety responses for a whole school district. I know there are people in our chat that have been part of this as well. And you guys understand that hardening up the threat, hardening up the target makes people choose other options. There's a reason why churches, especially Jewish synagogues, when they face real threats, what do? They put armed guards up. Is it awesome to go and worship where there's armed guards? No, but it's a sense of security. I carry every day when I go to Sunday Mass. I'm always in the back on purpose. I've always got a sight line to the door. I may not be the first person to it, but you're going to not get a whole lot done before I get to engage you. So my church is secured, and yours should be too. Shouldn't our kids have the same sort of thing? If you do send your kids to government schools, it's troubling. It's troubling that this is a political currency that we're going to play in. And they really are. And they have no problem doing it. They do it shamelessly. And again, at the opportunity cost of covering stories like this. This is the thing that happened just, what is it? What is the date on this? This 4 people killed in Chicago. September the 3rd. So 2 days ago, literally one day before we have a school shooting, this was a lower page immediately out of the news. It's very frustrating to watch them pick and choose which stories are going to lead and they're going to tug on your heartstrings and where they can actually move the political agenda. I guess there's no agenda talking about how either some urban black guy or some, illegal immigrant with a gun decided to come in and shoot people on a train who were doing nothing except sleeping on the train. Pretty awful. All right, we're going to get into the media story and the lies. Again, this is going to be more of that propaganda piece, which I want to talk about. Let me push this. We haven't talked about my friends over at Mad Hat Jerky for a little bit, and I had some yesterday. MattHatJerky.com/Kyle is the website. Matt, M-A-T-T, hat, M-A-T, jerky.com/Kyle. You can use the promo code KYLE. It should automatically fill in for you. Save yourself 20%. They may send you a better discount code later, especially if you guys want to do it. You can also continue to save 20% by setting up a subscription. It's a high-quality, meat-based snack. I don't know how, this just makes me happy to say that. Yeah, it's a jerky, but it's like steak in a bag. It's as good or better than anything that I've had, and I used to try them all over the place, whether it be from little fancy gas stations to Costco's and things like that. It's a really tasty, but a high-quality product. It's moist. It's a little bit chewy like you'd expect from a jerky. It's got great flavor. You can guys get more or less spice. My favorite is called Black Truffle. If you want to start with that, you will not be disappointed. Check out MattHatJerky.com. Put in an order. When you do, make sure you tag us with the promo code KYLE to save that 20%, which is not nothing, especially in this economy, 20%. Let's keep pushing forward into this because let's go into propaganda, shall we? We talked a little bit about how the political right now is doing this move where they're selling gold and they're selling you something about fear and uncertainty in the economy, and all those things are real, sure. And then the answer is that they want to fleece you for it. Right now, the left is absolutely loving this. I actually got a text message from one of the guys that I trust that works over at The Intercept, and I appreciate his perspective. And I might just read it to you. I'm not going to tell you what his name is, but let me just read it to you. Some of you will already know. The Julie Kelly's a big Democrat donor, and the right-wing influencers who sounded like Russian useful idiots actually were Russian useful idiots. What a fun cycle. Yeah, wild times. So that's the statement. Here's CBS News saying the U.S. Says Russia funded media companies that paid right-wing influencers millions of dollars for videos. Do you know why I always tell you to be skeptical? More than one thing can be true at once. And I think that my take on this is, again, going to be more nuanced. More than one thing can be true at once because Tenet Media was apparently set up by Lauren Chen, who's at The Blaze, and her husband. And they got $10 million from folks in Russia Today, which is known as RT, something that was kicked off U.S. media, but is still available on Twitter and places like that. You can find them. They got all this money to basically pay right-wing influencers, but it's not really clear that they told them what content needed to be done. In fact, what it sounds like is they just wanted to license the content and boost the signal of things that were favorable towards Russia, which is not a crime necessarily. It's a crime if you know that it's Russian and you didn't sign up with FARA, F-A-R-A, the Foreign Agent Registration Act. But even when I worked for DOJ, even when I was working at the FBI, when we had possible FARA violations, they just told us they sent off letters. They never indicted anybody over that stuff. And what we're seeing, all this hubbub, which is going to be about the right-wing influencers, because that's what you're going to hear from the main media. Again, you're seeing CBS right here. I think I've got Politico saying a similar thing. I kind of want to run through the indictment because I pulled the indictment up. And I find that to be much more interesting than like the pseudo coverage that the news does. So the indictment is for two people known as Kostya and Lena. They are Russian citizens that live in Russia that the DOJ has indicted in one of these like goofy virtue signals. They're not going to go and arrest these people in Russia. They're not going to go to Moscow and extradite them. And Moscow's not going to give them up. So this is a moot point. This is an indictment with no possibility of leading to an arrest. That's number one. I want you guys to understand that because I haven't seen it covered that way. They're RT employees. Okay, let's just read. It's known as Russia Today, or it's formerly Russia Today, now known as RT. It's a state-controlled media outlet. It's funded and directed by the Russian government. Now you go, okay, fine. That's a propaganda wing. Yeah, I'm sure it is. Doesn't mean that they're wrong all the time, by the way. Some propaganda is actually accurate. But it does slant, kind of like the U.S. media slants in favor of our government. Number two, the paragraph number 2 in the introduction says this. Over at least the past year, RT and its employees, including the two that are named, and I'm not a Russian names expert, and my ability to pronounce their names is very bad. So it's Konstantin Kalishnikov. I can do the Kalishnikov one because it's a gun name. The other one is someone called Elena Afrasevia. I don't know. Lena and Kostya are the two that they refer to. That's their code names here. The defendants deployed nearly $10 million laundered through a network of foreign shell entities to covertly fund and direct U.S. Company One. U.S. Company One, based on the description within here, which is not named in the indictment, but you can put it together because they take the actual verbiage from Tenet Media's website and they put it directly into the indictment. So now we know, of course, that Tenet is in fact Company One. U.S. Company One publishes English language videos on multiple social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, X, YouTube, etc., and using fake personas. This person, Elena or Lena, edited, posted, and directed the posting of Company One's hundreds of videos, so helped have some sort of role in kind of putting together this propaganda. So that's the first statement. The second thing is, which I think is very interesting, is that it covered the particular topics and subject matter that Russia was interested in highlighting are immigration, inflation, and other topics of domestic and foreign policy, specifically Ukraine and Russia was a big deal too. While the views expressed in the videos are not uniform, this is critical because it doesn't show that they were directed or that they were told to do this. The views are not uniform. The subject matter and the content of the video are often consistent with the Russian government's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core of government of Russia interests, including the ongoing war in Ukraine. What does all that mean? People on the political right are looking at the United States government and saying, you guys are doing terrible policies. And if you highlight that, which people like Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and Benny Johnson have done, you're basically like everybody on the political right who sees that the United States government and its propaganda of trying to prop up a weak Biden administration are a real issue. What I see here, broadly speaking, and I want to just kind of encapsulate this in one statement. What I see is the opportunistic political leftist media, which is the legacy media, and they are very much in with government and the way the government runs. They are in bed with the government's position, the federal government's position. Why? Because the federal government and its employees lean left, and so does this media group. So they actually have an aligned interest. What they see is an opportunity to smear and attack and attempt to discredit independent media, because some of these independent media people have taken money from Russia. Now, it's an open warning to you. When someone comes and offers you more money than your product is worth, for example, when a gold company comes to Kyle Seraphin and says, we're going to give you $60,000 a year simply to read our ads for 60 seconds once a day, that makes me very suspicious. I go, I don't understand what your motives are. Unless there's some sort of altruism where they're like, look, we think you're an American patriot and we think that your family suffered unjustly and we want to give back, blah, blah. Okay, maybe there's a reason for that. But it sounds like Tim Pool was catching like $100,000 a week from Tenet Media to license those videos. So what you see there is someone offering you something for nothing and you're not providing a service that makes sense. You should ask some more questions. And they did, it turns out. So good on them. Again, this is directly from the indictment here, which I've already read to you guys. They published all these videos. This is the part that I find very interesting. Founder 1 and Founder 2, one of whom is Lauren Chen over at Blaze, also work together to deceive the online commentators. So Commentator 1 and Commentator 2 appear to be Tim Pool and Dave Rubin, I think is what they've basically unmasked them to be based on the subscriber accounts. The other person that was involved is Benny Johnson, so be it. I'm sure there were some others. I know people that are putting out content for Tenet Media. And honestly, if you're going to go and report on the border and someone offers you money to go do that and they think that your reporting is of value, it's not a bad thing to take that money per se. And if it turns out that someone lied to you and laundered the money to you from Russia, like, are you really at fault there? I don't think you are. Founder 1 and Founder 2 contracted with Commentator 1 and Commentator 2 to produce videos using Commentator 1 and Commentator 2's own names and leveraging their existing audience. So, the question is, did they leverage them and contract them to create videos, or were these people already creating and making videos and just allowing for the licensing under a different name? And it appears to me, based on what I've read in this indictment, that they simply took an existing program. There's Timcast IRL, which I've been on more than once, and some of the other programs that they have. They're already doing some reporting. They're already doing some content, and they have a very specific lean. And one of their leans is that they're not a big fan of Ukraine, which I am also not a big fan of, because it looks like we've got a lot of dirty fingers in that dirty pie. So I'm not crazy about being there. So what's wrong with them saying, hey, we'd like to license your content? Now, $100,000 a week, which is the alleged amount of money, that seems like a pretty high amount of money for something that you're making, close to that for all the work you do. Someone's just going to take your content and then they're going to repackage it out to their new audience. That's sketchy, but it doesn't make it wrong. And it certainly doesn't make it illegal, which is why they're not actually named in this indictment, because they haven't done anything wrong. Now, this is what you're seeing. Founder 1, Founder 2 work together to mask Company 1, again, Tenet Media's true source of funding, i.e. Russia Today, by falsely portraying Commentator 1 and Commentator 2 that the U.S. company was actually sponsored by a private investor, which is someone they made up, someone named Eduardo Gregorian. Okay, so let's get right down to the meat of it, which is to say, the two people you see on the bottom, Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, also Benny Johnson, but I didn't want to put his picture up. They are supposedly deceived by Lauren Chen, who is not indicted either, by the way. She's just named. So she hasn't necessarily done anything wrong, at least per DOJ, at least not yet. They went after people that they're not going to be able to arrest in non-US based media simply because the money was funneled under false pretense to the two guys you see at the bottom. This is a Russia, discredit the independent media that's saying things we don't like. What I don't see a ton of wall-to-wall coverage, and you'll probably see them try to cover this out and be much more upset about this Tenet Media, this non-arrestable indictment. What I don't see is the discussion about Kathy Hochul having a Chinese spy as a deputy chief of staff. We haven't heard about it all over the place except on the political right that Dianne Feinstein had a spy, like living in her office for a very long time and driving her around and listening to her phone calls. A senator who died in office. But let's play a couple of these little things. First of all, I got this little fun thing about a journalist asking Kathy Hochul. She actually takes credit for the spy being arrested that she hired and had in a position of authority inside the state of New York. You can't make up the hypocrisy of these people. Like she said, we saw all these issues, and so that's why we reported her, and that's why she was arrested. Really? Why do they always go for the Democrats? Why does the Chinese threat always migrate to Democrats, and they seem like a soft thing? And then you're worrying about Russian threats going to the right-wing side, even though Putin actually said that Biden was his preferred candidate because Biden is much weaker and much easier, and that's why they were able to go into Ukraine. Does it make any bit of sense whatsoever? Also, between the threats that exist, China, infinitely more threatening. On the global stage, in the current market, in the current situation, a much bigger intelligence threat to the United States than Russia. We're still adjudicating the Cold War. Why? Because a lot of people are still boomers mentally. A lot of people lived through the Cold War and remember Russia as the foe, and so they're always the foe. But it turns out, yeah, you're right. Tim Walz, same thing. All these people on the political left tend to get these Chinese infiltrations. So here's a little taste of Kathy Hochul taking credit for something that I don't quite understand. She's responsible for stopping the thing that she actually created.
Governor, I wouldn't be doing my job as a journalist if I didn't ask you about recent news about your office, and that was the story that broke yesterday about your former deputy chief of staff, Linda Sun, who was arrested and charged with acting as an undisclosed agent of the Chinese government. Your office has made clear she'd been fired in March of 2023 for misconduct, and you are cooperating with law enforcement. But is there anything else you can tell us about that case?
Absolutely shocking. And she has been in government for many, many years, even prior to the time I became governor, where she was involved in making a lot of decisions related to the relationship between the administration at the time and the Chinese government, promoting Chinese, viewpoints and giving them proclamations and visas, and actually at the same time really diminishing any involvement with the country of Taiwan. It is shocking in its scale. I'm glad we were able to see some evidence that was, didn't look right to us, and we immediately alerted the authorities, and hence we have this outcome. And
yeah, just go ahead and take credit for the arrest. Christian South over on X just said the right thing. The journalist opens with an apology. It wouldn't be right for me as a journalist if I didn't ask you this question, so allow me to apologize for coming in and doing the job of journalism, which is asking you a real question about someone that you hired. It's interesting because Kathy Hochul actually said something that is pretty specific. You don't see a lot of the so-called Russian spies actually working inside the United States government at the state or the federal level, any of the governments. Why is that? Why is it that Russia would just like to turn the minds of the people? They're interested in information ops, sure. I don't remember any penetrations of Russia while I was working at the Washington field office. I don't remember hearing about it. We had Chinese. And isn't it interesting that the law actually makes it very difficult to go after a lot of what the Chinese does? They're not crimes. They're threats, as we talked about at the beginning here, but not crimes. And that should actually concern you because there's strong lobbying positions inside this thing. The mouthpiece are more than happy to go out there and attack and parade. Is it just me, or is it very strange to watch the leftist media doing the shill work of the government, literally running propaganda pieces against whatever's on the right, unironically? Here's MSNBC doing that because Russia's the big threat. That's the one they want to focus on. They want to ignore China, maybe because they're more sympathetic to the actual communist country, since that's not what Russia is anymore. It's weird to me to watch it. Okay, MSNBC doing some defense work. This is pretty nauseating stuff, too.
We begin this hour with breaking news. The Biden administration taking a series of actions to target what they allege are attempts by Russian-backed actors to manipulate public opinion here in the U.S. ahead of the presidential election, according to two senior U.S. officials. Joining us now is NBC's Ken Delanian. Ken, what more have we learned?
Jose, this is being described by our sources as a whole-of-government action designed to target Russian propaganda and disinformation aimed at interfering in the 2024 election. It is said to include sanctions by the Treasury Department, law enforcement action by the Justice Department, and one of the focuses is on RT, formerly known as Russia Today, that network of Russian government-funded English-language websites and television platforms that was flagged all the way back in 2017 by the U.S. intelligence community as a vehicle for Russian disinformation and election interference. And at that time, the Justice Department required RT to register as a foreign agent. It remains to be seen exactly what actions the U.S. will take against RT today, but this does appear to represent an escalation in the efforts to try to purge the system of Russian propaganda. And
oh, God forbid the propaganda be coming from the Russians, including people who are American dissidents, that are American citizens, that live in the United States of America, that get the FBI through their door for this. Former weapons inspector, what's his name? Something Ritter. Is it Scott Ritter? I think it's Scott Ritter. Had his house raided. There are multiple people who are involved with RT that are getting a paycheck, doing honest work, writing opinions. Steve Friend has appeared on a program that ended up being rebroadcast under RT. You think Steve Friend is a sycophant for Russia? Or is it possible that they just look at it? I mean, he's married to a flippin' Ukrainian woman by birth. We're watching major interference happening, and that's what's so funny. That's why they are doing election threats and not election interference, because the DOJ continues to be the ones that actually do interfere with the elections. And so does the damn mainstream media. This thing you're seeing up here is coming from a Twitter account, which does SEO monitoring. On the left, what you see is Harris in a Google search, and the green circles are all favorables, and the reds are all negatives. What you see are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 7 positive articles about Kamala Harris in the mainstream media, written, the legacy print journals, and 1 negative article and 1 neutral about Kamala Harris in the main search results for Google. On the right-hand side, you see Trump. You see exactly 1 story that says something positive, and the rest of it is all red. Who's doing propaganda now? It's a simple question. How about actual U.S. government propaganda? Are you familiar with the Voice of America? It's full of spies. I will just say that just for non-dramatic effect. As someone who used to work counterintelligence in Washington, D.C., there are counterintelligence investigations into dozens of people at that organization. Voice of America. Why? Because they hire native speakers, people who speak Chinese with a native accent, people who speak Russian or Ukrainian with a native accent, people from those countries. It is full of counterintelligence investigations, people who are probably compromised either by family or ideology towards the places that they are actually broadcasting. And it's massively left-leaning. They have an entire section about Ukraine, which has nothing but propaganda about how great the war is going and how bad Donald Trump's policy would be for Ukraine and the foreign minister doing bad. Like, it's just nonsense. It's like, oh, here's Russia doing mean things. Here's Ukrainian victories. When you slant the news, this is actual government propaganda, and the U.S. government does it. This is essentially the same kind of operation that RT does. And we've been exporting it since World War II. Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, American perspective piped into your country. It's propaganda pieces. It's not surprising the United States should have it in. And in a free and fair country, which we should have, a place where we have the First Amendment, which says that everybody has the right to free press and free assembly and so on, shouldn't you be allowed to read RT and be able to decide for yourself? This nanny government approach, which is the same exact BS attitude that drives us to taking guns away from people and saying that the federal government should be able to solve these problems. It's the same ones that say that there are opinions that are just too damn dangerous for you and you shouldn't have it. I've got two more clips here. I got one from Chris Murphy talking about the exact same thing. They're all in on propaganda being bad, except when it's their propaganda.
What is your reaction to what you read in those more than 30 pages of the Justice Department indictment, laying out chapter and verse how a state media organization in Russia, therefore the Russian government, funneled money to conservative influencers to spout their propaganda here in the U.S.?
This is a stunning indictment, and it really shows potentially how deeply integrated Russia is with the MAGA media environment. This company that is described in Tennessee is a pretty well-known MAGA media company. It has on its payroll many of the top pro-Trump voices in this country, and they were knowingly conspiring with Russia, using millions of dollars to put content online and to pay a number of pro-Trump commentators that have been pushing an anti-Harris and pro-Russia narrative for months. So
it's an anti-Harris and pro-Russia. Do you see the smear? Do you see Chris Murphy, one of the worst too, another gun hater, hates the idea of Americans having actual civil liberties, hates the freedom there. Two things can be true at once. They took money from a shady organization and it was probably more money than was appropriate for what they were giving. Yep. Okay, fine. Is it illegal? No. Is it immoral? Not even necessarily. If somebody came here and said, hey, we'd like to take the Kyle Seraphin show, we'd like to put it on there, we'd like to chop up some clips, we'd like to give you $10,000 a month for it, $20,000 a month, I'd be like, oh, that's kind of high. What is your goal? I might ask some questions. Who's financing this? And they go, oh, it's this person and he has this thing. And you go like, okay. If you don't check it out that much, and you guys know that I'm a little bit more skeptical of everybody because I think everything I say that goes downrange, I'm going to be held accountable for. But maybe you just are like, hey, we're printing money. I've got a staff. Tim Pool's got a staff. I don't know what Dave Rubin's staff looks like, but I've seen the staff that Tim Pool keeps eating. And there's like a dozen plus people that work for him, maybe more. And they have a big operation that goes on. I've been there a couple times and they've actually upgraded their studios and their space and they're putting money into what they put out, a product. People want to pay you for your product. That's America. You're allowed to do that. And if they're not influencing anything, listen, the funny thing about all of this stuff is that the left keeps talking about how they want to do more censorship. Imagine if they didn't do the stupid censorship routine and they just allowed Russia Today to just do what they do, which is to say, hi, we're RT, formerly known as Russia Today. And everyone would go, yeah, it's Russian propaganda. Then you've got RT with their little green logo out there saying whatever it is they are. And whenever somebody would quote the story from Russia Today, RT, you'd go, okay, we'll take that with a grain of salt because that's coming directly from the mouthpieces of the Russian government. So we know the Russian government is putting it out there. And you could say this is a possible source, but here's some things that sort of contrast. I'd like to be able to hear all the perspectives, and I'm totally fine with it. How about China Post? They do the same sort of stuff. Let them publish their perspective in their own terms. And then they're not going to go spend a bunch of money trying to subvert people by getting it kind of seated in there. And if they chose to highlight the things that they like more, that conservatives are already saying, which is that the war in Ukraine is a joke and should not be happening, and that they're writing away our money to fund Ukrainian pensions, you don't need to pay me to do that. I already think it's trash. I don't want to be involved in that country. I'm America only. I'm far right. I'm way more right than the America First people. I don't want to see my money, which is basically now just debts that my children and my grandchildren are going to incur. I don't want that going over to Ukraine. Screw them. And I don't want it to go to like basket weaving for transgenders in Nigeria either. I don't want that. Keep the money in the United States. I'm totally into isolationism until we figure out what the heck we're doing. Just because Russia wants to have their hand in here doesn't mean that we're not doing the same thing over there. And it doesn't mean that we're not doing the same thing everywhere, as shown by Voice of America. And that's just the overt stuff, guys. That's overtly U.S. government branded propaganda that leans to the American left. We're all doing the same garbage. We're just acting indignant that they've decided to do it over here because we've actually outlawed it, despite the fact that we have this nominally free press environment, which is pretty wild. Here's another really fun thing to see. This is the Obama era 2012 to 2014 ambassador to Russia outright calling for more censorship. Again, put it under the rug so these people are going to have to sneak their opinions in. I would much rather it be branded with their name so I can just evaluate it on its face and say some of this stuff is good. Listen, some propaganda is actually correct and actually gives you a novel perspective that you're like, oh, I'm glad I heard that. I also have some tempering information because I'm actually able to go out there and evaluate sources. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just look at it and people had a little bit of skepticism, which is what I argue here all the time. You should be skeptical of everything that's going on. Go out there and independently verify it and decide for yourself. Here's the problem with that. It takes a lot of work, which I keep finding out on True Social. People are like, oh, I don't know the truth. Will you just feed it to me? Listen, I just only trust this one name. I trust Benny Johnson. I trust Dan Bongino. He's never led me astray. How the hell do you know? You don't know if he's led you astray or not. You don't know if I've led you astray or not, unless you've evaluated it and found that it's true. And when I make a claim, I'll try to give you the receipts where they're at. And if I'm doing coverage, it's my opinion on these things. Here's an opinion that says we should have more censorship. I just think it's bad.
Ambassador, what can the U.S. do? And is there anything in what they said today that's going to in any way dissuade Vladimir Putin?
I think this is a good sign. It's a shot across the bow to remind Americans of this kind of behavior. We talked a lot about it in 2016. We should have talked more about it in 2020, by the way. They did various activities then. I applaud what the Biden administration is doing right now to remind everybody that this is happening. They obviously have very good technology to uncover what has happened. That's a good reminder to the Russians. And I think the very fact that they're doing this is a gentle reminder to all Americans to be careful about what they're reading when the source comes from Russia. And I want to remind everybody, you can go on X right now and find RT. The very people that are being indicted right now, they are freely tweeting, they're freely propagating their disinformation in the United States. This is a good reminder, I think, to Americans of who these actors actually are working for. They're working for Vladimir Putin. They are.
That is a really, really aggressive claim. They're working directly for Vladimir Putin when they're taking money from Russian. Like, do you guys know how the government works? Even the government in Russia doesn't work like the top guy is demanding individually that everybody follow suit with what they think. It's not how it works. No company you've ever worked for, nobody's ever said like, oh, you work for Walmart, the CEO is telling you how to do your job as a door greeter. It's bull. It's garbage. Can we please just be smarter about this stuff? And you know what? Isn't that just a kind of a comment? There's another article, which we'll probably cover a little bit more on tomorrow, that advertisers are running away from Twitter X because Twitter X is the only place where people can actually go in and get all the sides of it. If you want to hear the garbage, if you want to hear what Nick Fuentes says, and I think he's a moron. He's not dumb, by the way. I think the things he says are really disingenuous. But if you're going to make the claim that somebody is giving you disinformation, that the Russians are involved in disinformation, then you have to actually show that that information is false, knowingly false, and it's being shown specifically to mislead you. The word disinformation means something. The government defined it for us. Misinformation is the thing they often mean, which is probably what would happen if someone like a Tim Pool or a Dave Rubin are inaccurate. They're saying something that's not true, but they don't mean to be deceiving you. And then lastly, the thing that we like to trade in over here, because we're kind of like, we're not in the neutral ground. We're definitely further on the right, maybe too far on the right, but we'll shoot at anybody on any side that's lying. Malinformation, truth that's decidedly not comfortable for those who are in power. That's what I'm all about. Malinformation, the inconvenient truth. The things that are accurate, which means that I kind of sit on both sides and I go, look, Tim Pool, I don't agree with Tim Pool about everything he says. He's probably like, he's not one of my friends, but I'm friendly with him. And he's been respectful and he's invited me to come and share my opinion and he didn't censor me. And he has his own right to an opinion and he's an American. So he can do whatever the heck he wants and say whatever he wants. And he's successful in what he does because there is an audience for it. So screw you if you want to try to take that from him. And if he wants to collect money and license his material, then he will. That's American. And if the government wants to go out there and slander these people by indicting people in Russia that they're never going to be able to arrest, and they will not, these people are safe from all DOJ prosecutions. They're not coming to the United States, nor would they ever. The same way that I don't want to go to Russia. I don't need that. Can we just cut down the middle and just say, listen, in an information war, we're going to need some fair arbiters, which is why I will tell you when the FBI is not totally wrong, and they're not totally wrong in ignoring certain threats and referring it to the sheriff's department. That's what has to happen. We need to be more about accuracy. However it cuts, if it doesn't cut in our favor, so be it. Like, the world doesn't just serve up narratives that fit Kyle Serafin's worldview all the time. Regularly, things come up and you're like, that's inconvenient. Brian Stelter said something that's true. Does he say things that are false all the time? Of course. Does he say some things that I'm going to have to agree with? Yeah. Why? Because he's a grown man in America, and there must be some common ground that we all have. And if we were operating from a place of truth and honesty, that common ground would be far better off, and there'd be far more of it. Instead, we're encouraging people to go tribal, and they're going after personality instead of principles. I don't want any of that. We didn't used to do that in this country. We used to be a proper nation. And that includes women in bikinis shooting machine guns in the desert for some damn reason. And I don't know why that's the image I always have. And I actually made my wife start watching Tropic Thunder again last night simply because of what we played. We got some really bad options on the table. But here's the other fun thing that I keep seeing. The with us or against us attitude has got to stop. You can be on your own team. That's literally the American dream, is it not? That you are an independent arbiter of what you want to consume, what you want to think, and you can have reasonable discussions with people, and you don't have to agree with them, and they don't need to force consensus on you. You can say Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils, and that doesn't make you a Kamala Harris supporter. And people who are on the political right, you probably need to start looking out to the people in the middle and saying, what are the olive branches? Like, I don't agree with some of the things you say, but listen, do you think things are better? Can you look at the context of what we talked about yesterday? Of the last 16 years, 12 of them have been by Democrats. Have those things gone in your favor? Were things better in 2019 before the COVID stops got pulled out and we shut down the economy for some illogical reason? Were they better? That's a real simple discussion. It's not emotional, it's not charged, and it's not Russian propaganda. It's just based on people's experience of being human beings that can come to their own independent conclusions. We should probably try to encourage a lot more of that. We give you guys a 5-star review. Let me do maybe one more read here. How about my buddies over at Patriot Coolers? If you guys want to support a good company that has never once told us what we can or cannot say, they've sponsored us without ever trying to lean on the editorial content. PatriotCoolers.com is our group. They're pretty apolitical. They just like America. They say Patriot on all of their tools, and their tools are tumblers and hard and soft-sided coolers and some merchandise, and they're super nice people out down in Houston, Texas, America. You guys can get a discount, 10% off by using promo code Kyle. It's KYLE. KYLE will save you that 10% if you spend $50 or more. Get yourself 2 tumblers and find yourself one extra lid. They have 2 different styles of lids. Some of the screw on and some of the press on. And the press on ones are good if you want to put like a big silicone straw in it. Do that, $50 or more, free shipping. Buy one for you, buy one for a spouse, buy one for you, buy one for that jerk at the office that always steals your cup or is using your coffee mug. Check them out, and you can also customize them with our own logos or even logos that you like if you're a firefighter or a nurse or a police officer. PatriotCoolers.com. Check them out under the Customize Me tab. Cool stuff. And we will be adding them eventually to our merch store as well, so you guys will get whatever the ones that we design, so you don't have to be a graphic designer. That is kind of less fun. Here's a 5-star review for you. Mr. Jinx UK. Mr. Jinx UK, are you in the UK? Because that makes your opinion less important to me. Just kidding. No, I'm serious. One of the good guys, 5 stars. Kyle Serafin applies his FBI insights to today's events. He's whip smart, observant, and has a positive attitude that gives me hope for this country. Most importantly, he's a patriot who would fit right in with our founders. He's one of the good guys. I probably would fit in with some of the founders, but they were kind of elitists. I kind of into that. But the powdered wig thing, I'm not into. And the men in tights, the gun thing, and give me liberty or give me death. I am into extreme stuff. So there's that. All right, let me throw a little bit of a palate cleanse going into the world. For some reason, I've been thinking about this song. There was this whole piece that I saw this morning about Disney movies and whitewashing like real history, especially stuff about Native Americans or Indians. Anyone who's ever worked on an Indian reservation, anyone who's ever lived near an Indian reservation and had the people off the reservation come in. The idea that there was this like perfectly harmonic, every single tribe in America was like perfectly in tune with God's beautiful creation. It's total garbage. It's complete myth. And it made me think about some of the other ones. One of the great Disney movies of all time is Beauty and the Beast, which I absolutely love. And I have daughters who have not quite gotten into that. They're more into Elsa right now, but Beauty and the Beast is great. This, I think, might be the origin story of Kamala Harris. She never really fit in the ghetto, but she always wants that ghetto vote. So here's Beauty and the Hood. I found this on Instagram. I've just been waiting to play it for you for a long time, so enjoy this. It's a little silly.
Hey, little mama, can I get them digits so I can hit you on your cell? Yo, let me get it, though.
Her beauty ain't all that,
but her booty is real fat.
No denying she a bougie girl that belle. What's good?
What it do?
How is your mind now? Bonjour. What you call me? How is your wife? I ain't sick like. That's too expensive. There must be more than this on hood rat life.
I just ruined that song for you. Sorry. It's been in my head for a couple of days because I heard it and it's like, I got to just work it into a show at some point. I don't know if it actually makes any sense. All right, that's it for the day. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. It's already Thursday on this shorter week that we did. So we will catch you tomorrow with my friend, the real Steve Friend, on our Friendly Friday episode. We're going to go over the Trans Manifesto. We'll try and touch some other interesting stuff. We might actually do a little bit more about school shootings. I kind of want to get Steve's perspective and maybe hardening some ideas in that sphere. So check us out tomorrow. Make sure you bookmarked it. And otherwise, God bless you. Have a great day. Get out there, get off social media for a few minutes. Hang out with some real people. It's not as bad as they think.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.